I'm Beth Billings and I'm from Around the Table Yarns. Today is Monday and we are doing Sweater Club. We're doing the first sweater of Sweater Club and for the 2024 year. And I'm just going to share my screen for a second and show you a picture of the one that we're doing. If I can remember how to share my screen. Oh, there. So this is the Quintessiential Cardigan from Church Mouse Classics. I want to just point out a few features of this pattern. It is done in pieces. So there are seams at the sides and the shoulders. Each piece is done separately. It is worked from the bottom up. So we start with the ribbing and go up towards the neckline for all of the pieces. There is a jewel neckline and set in sleeves. There is a self-finished button band that is done as we go. And the sleeves are knitted separately and sewn in. They have done it out of a number of different fibers combined. Here you can see it's very light and fluffy looking, and that is done with 2 lace weight mohair silk blends held together, but you can also do it with just 1 mohair silk blend and a fingering weight, or you could do it in a DK weight. There's a range of sizes, so there's 8 sizes, and they have both a cropped and a longer sleeve length, depending on what you like. It is a really nice pattern. It is not an inexpensive pattern, but they have done a lot of testing and they have a lot of extra information in the pattern. I'm not going to show the rest of the pattern because it is for purchase and you do need to have a copy of it available to you to continue with this class. It's available on Ravelry and it's $12 for the pattern. If you have questions about it, feel free to contact us at the store, 216-230-9224. And during working hours, we can help you find the pattern or find the materials to make the sweater. I'm going to pin. And now I'm the star of my own show. So there's a few things I want to talk about with this pattern. Oh, look, there's my doggy sleeping behind me. And the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about gauge and swatching. So, second, and I'll get some paper. And we'll swap over to the camera. Not too bright. Not too bright. All right. And so the first thing that I just want to bring up is this pattern has different sizes that go from a finished bust measurement of 33 inches. I'm going to turn down my light just a little bit. Easier to read. There we go. So the sizes go from 33 inches up to 54. And if there's anybody who's doing it who needs sizes bigger than that, it's certainly something that we can work out. So please speak up or let me know if you need a different size than 33 to 54. And they're calling for a gauge of 22 stitches, to 4 inches. and 30 rows. So this is very classically a DK weight kind of a range. It's the same as saying 5.5 stitches equals 1 inch. And they suggest in the pattern that you cast on and do a gauge swatch. And to do that, they recommend doing a gauge swatch of 33 stitches and knitting it for 6 inches. So they really want you to have a I think it's 6 inches. They really want you to have a generous gauge swatch to be able to determine your size. Sorry, find my gauge swatch pattern. Swatching for gauge. Yep, they want you to, so they want you to make a 6 by 6 inch swatch. So if I just drew that out, and they want you to block it. So let's say you make a gauge swatch, and what you're going to want to do is take a ruler and measure across the center of that swatch. So you don't generally want to measure a gauge swatch at the bottom or the top. I personally like to measure my gauge swatches after they're blocked and on the wrong side. And that's because with a stockinette swatch, the edges will roll in a little bit. And I like to take a rigid ruler and put it across and measure as exactly as I can from one side to the other across the middle of the stitches. And the reason I go around the middle is that the cast on and the bound off edges can distort your gauge a little bit. And so I find it's more accurate if you can measure away from the beginning and the end of your swatch. So again, it's a 33 stitch swatch knitted for 6 inches. And you can record the number of rows. And then what you're going to do to determine your gauge, if you've done your 33 stitch swatch, you're going to take the number 33 and you're going to measure across and come up with a very accurate measurement. So in this case, it's 1 inch and 1/8, 2/8, 4. Well, it looks like it's 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9/16 for mine, but you would maybe measure across and you would find that your swatch was 6 inches wide or 5 inches wide. So whatever your measurement is of your swatch, let's say it was 6.5 inches wide. And then you would do math. Sorry, I'm pulling out my phone. Or I'm not pulling out my phone. Oh, it's right under where I was sitting. Hello. So let's say you had 33 inches and you divided it by your actual measurement was 6.5, then you'd come out with a gauge of 5.07 or rounding up 5.08. And that would be your actual gauge. Since you wanted 5.5, you could make a decision. This is more stitches. So 5.5 stitches to the inch is more stitches per inch than 5.08. So this is bigger. So if your gauge swatch was 6.5 inches, it would be bigger than what the pattern is calling for. So in that case, you might want to go down a needle. If you came out with a gauge swatch of 5.5 inches, then your stitches would be 6 inches, 6 stitches to an inch. And you might want to go up a needle size. So the higher the number, the smaller the stitches. That means more stitches are fitting into an inch. The lower the number, the bigger the stitches. So when you're checking your gauge, you're wanting to knit a generous sized gauge and you're wanting to block it so that it is laying as flat as possible and so that the work has been washed and dried or made completely wet and dried as if it were being laundered, so that you can get a good idea and a good estimate of what the fabric is going to do as you use it and wear it and clean it. We had a number of people in the class today who had a gauge of 6 stitches to the inch and they liked it and they wanted to continue with that gauge. They did not want to go up a needle size to get a looser gauge. They liked the tension and they liked the density of the fabric that they got. And so what we recommended to them is they take the actual measurement of their body or of another sweater that fit them well. So in the case of one of our students today, she wanted a 45-inch bust or circumference around the sweater. So a bust circumference, finished measurement of 45 inches. And we took that from a sweater that she brought in. So if that's the measurement you want, then you multiply it times your stitch gauge. 45 times 6 gives you 270 stitches around. This is done in pieces. So the largest piece is the back, which is half of your total number of stitches. 270 divided by 2 equals 135. So we looked at the stitch counts for the different sizes. And although a size that would be the closest to her of 45 inches around, with their gauge, would have been the 5th size. So 45 inches with their gauge would have been the 5th size. And with her gauge, it turned out to be much closer to the, I think it was the 2nd to last size. Yep. So this was much closer to the 7th size. So we recommended that she do the 7th size for all the things that had to do with the stitch count. So she would follow the 7th size for all stitch count information. But she would follow the 5th size, because this is what her actual measurement is, for all inches information. So all inches. So anything in the pattern where it says to knit for 12 inches or knit for 3 inches, or to knit for a certain number of inches in relationship to each size, any of those kinds of instructions, she's going to want to follow the 5th size. But for anything that has to do with casting on, decreasing, or increasing, she's going to want to follow for the 7th size. So there is a way of adjusting this pattern to fit for larger and smaller, or for differences in your stitch gauge. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. The pattern calls for making a sweater in pieces, and I'm just going to draw out a little version of it. So it looks a lot like this. It's straight up and down. And the fronts are lower than the front neckline is lower than the back neckline. And the sleeves look very similarly to other sleeves that you've probably seen, kind of like that. And they have different lengths or it can come down longer. So, and I'm just showing one half of it. There would be a similar one for the other side. So what we determined today is that we're going to try in this first month to work on the body from the cast on of the back and the left front. The left front is the side that has the buttons, not the buttonholes. And we're going to get both of those pieces up to the armhole shaping before the next class. So that we'll talk about armhole shaping and then the neck shaping in the next class. So looking ahead, this is pretty straightforward. They actually have you cast on pretty easily. They have you do a cable cast on. So I want to show what a cable cast on is. And then they use the clip and turn method for making short rows. And I'm going to show you the clip and turn, and then I'm also going to show you the German short row. And that will give you enough tools to follow the pattern for the back. So the back, when you cast it on, you have your however many stitches and you do your ribbing. So that's the first thing that happens is you knit all of the ribbing pieces. And then when you start doing stockinette, very soon into it, you do a short row to here, a short row to here, a short row to here. So you do 4 short rows. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that raises up the back by about 1/2 inch to 1 inch, depending on your row gauge. And that gives you a little bit more length in the back so that it doesn't ride up. And that's because the back of the neck, if you're looking at somebody, the back of their neck is higher than the front of their neck on a sweater. You know, if you can even see it here. This is, even though you're going to compensate a little bit, there's a little bit more to your back than to your front. And so it tends to pull sweaters up in the back. And by adding a little bit of extra length, it can make them look more level at the bottom. So the German short row or the clip and turn short row that they suggest is a way of creating length so that the sweater fits better. And that's one of the nice things about doing a sweater is that it fits better because you make it to fit you really exactly. All right. Turn that light on. So I just want to show you a cabled cast on first. And a cable cast on is very similar to a knitted cast on. It starts with a slip stitch. And you make a second stitch. You can make it any way you want. I'm going to do a knitted second stitch. And so then you have 2 stitches on the needles. To do a cabled cast on, you go between the 2 stitches on the needles, wrap, pull through, and put back on. Now you go between the one that you made previously and the one you just put on. And you just keep adding stitches to your needle like that. The reason it's called a cabled cast on, let me do a few more and then I'll show you, is because when you pull one of the stitches out and put it over, you have 2 sides of the stitch, and then you go between that one and the one before it to pull the next stitch out, and it creates what looks like a twisted cable or rope on the back of your, on the very base of your that seems very fuzzy today. It gives you a rope-like appearance, and that's why they call it the cabled cast on, because it looks like a twisted cable or rope. Okay, so that's the cast on they recommend. You are not required to do a cabled cast on. If you prefer a long-tailed cast on, you can do that. But the cabled cast on is a nice sturdy cast on. Oh, I love seeing all my little kitty hairs, because I leave this here and then my kitties come and sit down. Okay, so I'm going to show you mine, but mine is in the wrong color for showing on the screen. But I'm just going to show you so you can see what the short rows do. So this is, oh, you really can't see it at all. That's lovely. Hold, please.
You put the white paper back down.
Yeah. There, I'm increasing my exposure and zooming out. So this is the back of mine. And what I want you to see is that it is slightly longer in the middle. I've worked too far, and it's slightly not as long on the sides. And that's because I've worked several rows back and forth through the middle that lengthened this part, but not the edges. And that's what the short row shaping will do. So what I want to do is demonstrate the short row shaping with bigger, brighter yarn that you can see easily. And I have a locking marker here. I have this kind of locking marker, which is all right. Hoping to see better definition. This is the better of the cameras, so I'm hoping to get better. Oh. Let me use a different piece of knitting. It's very bright and it's not working. Not super satisfied, but let's see if we can get this to be at least demonstratable. Okay, so the difference between the German short row and the clip and turn is the use of a removable marker. So I'm going to just open up this marker. And you would work over to where you want to make your turn. So in this case, it's done in the first several rows of stockinette that are following the ribbing.
You need to move your hands up a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm just knitting.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so let's say you get to the point where they say to knit to so many stitches before the end. So you get to that point, and all you're going to do the clip and turn is turn. Where did it just go? Got more. Just put it off the edge. So you're going to turn. You're going to take a removable marker and clip it to your yarn like that, and hold it near to where you've clipped it onto. So I'm holding it with my fingers right up there. I'm going to get a different color so you can see it better. Hold it near to where you're moving, so near to where the yarn is coming out of, and then you're going to slip that first stitch and continue back on the stitches you were working. And just leave the marker in place. So it clips the marker right in next to the stitches that you were working. Do you see that? And you can just keep going to the point where it tells you to make the next turn. And when you make the next turn, you simply turn, clip another removable marker on, again, hold it close to where the yarn is coming from the previous stitch. You slip the first stitch, always slip that stitch purlwise, and then continue knitting. So there's a visible gap from where you did the turn. On the back, you can see that there is the marker attached to where we clipped the yarn. And I'm going to knit back to my first turn. And you're going to knit all the way over to the last stitch. When you're knitting, you work all the way to the last stitch. And then what you want to do is use the clipped part of the yarn to close the gap between the last stitch before the turn and the next stitch along in your knitting. So you're going to pull up on the marker, not twisting it. So you don't want to turn it so that there's a twisted stitch. You want to keep it straight. You're going to put your left knitting needle into it so it's not twisted. Remove, oh, I just broke my marker. Hello. Remove the marker by breaking it into small pieces. And then you're going to knit that clipped stitch together with the next stitch. And that's how you do the clip and turn. And then you can continue. Now, I'm just going to show you a German short row. So a German short row, you knit to the place where you want to turn, and then you turn. And then instead of clipping the stitch, you take the working yarn, you slip the first stitch purlwise, and then we're going to take the working yarn from the front of the stitch and pull up on it so that the legs of the stitch that it's attached to are distorted and lengthened to the top part of the needle. See how I've lengthened those two halves of that stitch to the top part of the needle? Bring the yarn back around to purl and work back. So that's how you do a German short row on when you've been knitting and you're going to a purl row. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to resolve this Japanese stitch. So the Japanese stitch, this is the reason I'm not so sure I want to do Japanese stitches, because it's fairly straightforward when you're doing the knit stitch, but when you're on the purl row, you work to the last stitch. And then you slip the next stitch from the left needle. Then you pull up the stitch from the marker that's being held by the marker. And then you replace the stitch that you just moved. So in other words, you want the marker stitch to be behind the next stitch on your left needle. And then you can purl them together. If you don't do that, then what happens is the clip stitch is visible on the front of the work. If we were to do a German short row, we would turn at the point where we want to turn. And the only thing you have to remember for the German short row is just to bring the yarn to the front. So you have to do it with the yarn in the front. You slip the next stitch and then pull up. You distort the stitch again, lengthening the two legs of the stitch and going back. So now I'm going to resolve those two German short rows. So I'm going to knit over to the first one. And you can put a marker in front of your German short rows, or you can just sort of feel it. They look like that. When you come to them, they look like a doubled stitch. And when you come to them on the knit side, all you're going to do is knit both legs of that stitch together as one. Okay. And then I'm going to turn and go back to the purl side and show you how to resolve the purl side one. So let me get back over there. As you do short rows, they get further and farther apart. All right, so here we are. You can see that doubled stitch on my purl side. It's distorted and separated from the stitch next to it. And all you're going to do when you come to it is knit under both legs as though you were knitting two together. So you put your right needle under both legs of the doubled stitch and work it together and then continue on your way. I find that a little bit more straightforward than doing the German short row, than doing the clip and turn. I don't dislike the clip and turn, except that I find it fiddly to put my closing ring markers in and out, my locking markers in and out. So I prefer to do it without the little markers. But I will, if I'm going to do a German short row, so let's say this is my next German short row, I might, again, bring the yarn forward when you turn it on this side, slip the stitch and distort it, and then I might put a ring marker right there as a reminder there's a German short row stitch coming up. But that's, to me, that going in and out is much easier than doing and undoing a locking stitch marker. If you have a slip-in stitch marker, you could use that. We were talking about it in the class today, and I also suggested a bobby pin, that you could put a bobby pin on the clip stitch and use that, and it would be easier to get that in and out. I find that the safety pins or the locking stitch markers, as you saw, I broke my locking stitch marker, so I prefer the metal ones, and I still manage to poke myself with them pretty frequently. Okay, so that's the demonstration of the German short row versus the clip and turn. Any questions about that?
Is there any difference visually which type of short row, or do they both turn out looking the same?
So they're essentially doing the same thing in a slightly different way. So I don't think there's enough of a visual difference to justify the fiddliness of the one. If you can memorize the German short row, and the trick with the German short row is that you turn it, you slip it, and the yarn but when you slip it, the yarn has to be in front. So if you're turning it from the purl side, the yarn might not be in front and you need to move it to the front. Does that make sense? So I actually looked for videos today that did some kind of compare and contrast of German versus the clip and turn, and I didn't find any. And I'm still curious to know if there are some. This may be it. This may be the video that compares and contrasts them. They're both going to the same point and turning, which I think is significant because the wrap and turn, you have another stitch involved. So if you're looking for an alternative to the clip and turn, definitely the German short row is the alternative to the clip and turn. You don't have to do any different figuring for the number of stitches involved because it's turning on the same point. Instead of the doubled stitch, you have that clipped part, but I find that last little thing where you have to move the one stitch over and then put the clip thing and then move the stitch back, I find that as fiddly as a wrap and turn. And it resolves better though, because a wrap and turn, I find that I have to do that kind of fiddling to make a wrap and turn resolve so it's not visible on the right side of the fabric. If you are using a DK weight fabric, it's a little bit more important that you have an invisible short row. If you're using a mohair, it might not show really at all because of the halo of the mohair on the top of the fabric. So it's really up to you if you want to do, I mean, some people don't do some people do wrap and turns and don't resolve them and just leave the little bit of extra yarn, kind of visible. That's, I think, a design choice that works better at the top of a sweater, at the shoulders of a sweater, than it does at the bottom of a sweater.
I don't know. Talvi Knits compares a bunch of different short rows, including this Talvi knit, this one that you just did, but she doesn't say which one's better.
She doesn't
But
say
she shows a whole bunch of different ones, including this clip and turn.
So I think that for different fabrics, there might be a reason to do one over the other. And it could also be the designer's choice or, their style of knitting.
Although she does say the German short rows is her go-to.
German short row is my go-to too. I really like it. I really like it. I find it the most memorizable and the smoothest looking. And, there is a little bit of distortion of the fabric when you have an extra row or, when part of the row is built up a little higher than the part next to it. So I find the German short row is the one that makes that transition the easiest. So for next month, sorry, not next week, we should cast on all of the stitches of the back. And I just want to say, when you do that when you have all of your stitches on the back, let me go back to my little drawing here. Hold on for a sec. So when you go to, when you're working on the back, the widest part of so we've talked about doing this 6-inch gauge swatch, and a gauge swatch is a great thing and it gives you the best estimation of what your knitting is going to be like before you actually start knitting. But once you actually start knitting, that is the estimation of what your knitting is going to be like. It's no longer an estimation, it's the actual thing. It is the real thing. So I always want to remind you to check your gauge a couple of inches after you've done, so I did that today myself. After you've finished the ribbing and you've done your short row shaping and you've done maybe a couple more inches of the knitting, lay it flat and just get an estimate. Like, is it in the ballpark of the size that you want it to be? Taking back this portion of the back, yes, it's the most stitches that you'll cast on, but it's not the whole sweater and it's not sewn together. So if you've made any kind of misjudgment in your sizing, this is the place to check it. And I really recommend checking the length of the back or the width of the back after the ribbing and before you get to the armholes to make sure that you're on track for gauge. If you are on track for gauge, then continue to whatever length you want for the armhole shaping to start. They recommend 12 inches. We had somebody who had a cropped version of the sweater and had done 9.5. There were other people who wanted to go longer. So that's completely acceptable. You can do whatever length you want. I would recommend comparing it to a sweater that fits you well, or trying on a dress that you like, or an outfit that you like that you want to adjust the length of this cardigan to. If that's some, like, there were people who had made the cardigan to do with like a wedding outfit that they were wearing to a wedding, and they wanted it to show off the waistline of the dress. So this is variable, as well as the length of the sleeves. We'll talk about the sleeves at a different time, but we're going to talk about doing this shaping and this shaping the next month. So if you can get to there, and then if you can do the button side. So the button side doesn't have the buttonholes. It's, I believe, the left front of our cardigan. And we just want you to get to the armhole shaping of that, just to have, you know, some work done and out of the way, because this is all pretty much straight knitting to there. We won't do the buttonhole side until we have the left front completed, so that we can really be confident in our placement of our buttonholes.
So in order to get the length that I wanted, I measured some cardigans because I've got lots of different size cardigans.
Yep.
And I used the adjusting the body length sidebar.
Yep.
So it said to add 36 and extra rows. Okay. To the instruction. So I would add those wherever it says, like on the first page of the instructions, it says work 68 more rows, and then I would just add 36 to that and kind of look.
Right. You want this part to be elongated, not this part.
Okay.
Right? Because this shaping has to fit into here. So you would have to change your sleeve shaping as well if you change the armhole shaping. So you only want to lengthen the body at the widest point.
Okay.
For all the pieces.
Okay. And I marked all those places where it said that in the pattern. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, the arms didn't have any changes, so
compared to the pattern.
Yes.
I love a 3/4 sleeve because I wash my hands a lot.
Yeah.
So
it's nice that it gives you that option, and it gives you the instructions for it. So
great. Well, any other questions? So what are you making yours out
of? Andorra.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Camel colored.
Fun. I like that yarn a lot. Jennifer, you making one?
I'm planning on it. Do you think it'd be okay to use the Remix Light?
I do, actually. I think Remix Light would be really nice, but I would double check your gauge for that, because that has that tweedy texture. And so you might want to really make sure that you're getting gauge.
Yeah, and my gauge is normally loose anyhow, so I was definitely going to do that first.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I find that sometimes those tweedy yarns are just, they're kind of chenille yarn was another one that, like, I would try to get gauge, and I'd have to go down and down and down and down a needle size until I finally got gauge. And I don't know if it's just because it's so textured that you pull through in a way that is like you make your stitches bigger because of the texture of the yarn itself.
Yeah,
Or
it's a little bit more open. I did that field sweater with the Remix Light, and the stitches were a little bit more open.
so if you want a denser fabric, you might have to go down a needle size or 4.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, don't ever hesitate to play up and down with your needle sizes to get
Oh,
exactly the tension that you want.
I do that all the time.
Good.
Mhm.
Well, I'm really excited about this sweater. I'm really glad to be starting. I might have to start one in a different color so that it can be seen on the camera. I will try and get a better color of sample so we don't have to do it with my tiny sock yarn.
Put a white sheet underneath it, under the black.
I don't know if you would see it any better.
Okay.
There seems to be, now that it's dark out and it's dark in my room, if
Ah,
white light on it, it's just like it distorts.
okay.
Like, there's we'll find something. I'll find something.
Mhm.
Okay. That is Sweater Club. So the next time we're meeting is February 18th, I think. Is that right? It's the third Monday in February, I believe. The first one is the 5th. The second one is the 12th. Is that right? Yeah. And then the next one is the
It'd be the 19th,
19th.
President's Day.
It's Am I on President's Day? I have to check that now. Okay, hold please. Is it on the, Jennifer, are you looking at it?
Yeah,
It is on the 19th. Okay. Well, there you go. It's on the 19th. And it's also up on our website. So if you are, and this recording will be up on the website as well. If you are looking at, let's see if I can go. Oop, that's not what I meant to do. Is it changing to my, so under calendar and resources, Project Monday is under calendar and resources. Somebody was looking for it under calendar. It's under Project Monday. Sweater Club is its own tab. And shortly, under here, we will be doing the video. We'll go here. And I'm going to update this because we realized that we're going to do the back to the armhole and the left front to the armhole. So I will be making an edit here of that information. So feel free to contact us if you ever have any questions, or come in if you need any help in person, or call and we can try and do stuff over the phone or over FaceTime or Zoom. All righty. You guys have a great night.
you too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
And looking forward to making pretty sweaters with everybody.
Yeah, I can't wait for this.